Welcome everybody to Greater Life, Greater Impact. This is episode number 22 of the Sovereignty series, and I'm Janet. I'm a quantum healing practitioner and a soul self-restoration coach. And what I do is I help take people to the uncharted waters of who they really are for healing, for spiritual awakening, and for personal transformation. And today we're going to be talking about belief cycles and how you can do some of your inner work by getting very clear on what's going on inside of you and why. I have Jessica Thurgood on today, and she is amazing. She is a health coach, a life coach, sorry. She's a life coach and is really gifted in the area of helping people go in and do their inner work, working with beliefs, the belief cycle specifically. So what I'm going to do is, Jessica, I'm just going to ask you a few questions. Like first to start off with, we're going to do some healing today, you guys. So get pens and papers out. If you need that, go get a drink of water. But buckle up because we are going to get to work doing our inner work today. Jessica's going to guide you and teach you some things that maybe you had not known about yourself before, or about how belief patterns and belief cycles work. But before we get into that, will you just share really briefly why do you do this work? How did you get in? Why do you do it? Why does it matter?
Yeah, so I think for those who don't know, Janet is my mother. So that's how I got into the work, was just by, I think, watching you do this work, and that's where my interest got piqued. And I have done all sorts of different types of certifications. I do energetic foot zoning. I am a licensed massage therapist with all sorts of different trainings in that. I'm a life and health coach. And just throughout the years of all of my different trainings and certifications, I have just become fascinated with this idea that when you know who you are and you know what your purpose is, life becomes limitless. Like potential becomes limitless. The potential to be who you were supposed to be, the potential for healing, the potential for understanding and connecting with yourself and connecting with community around you. It all starts with knowing yourself and knowing your identity, and how you show up in the world and what part you play in the world. It all starts with understanding that first basic element. So in my years of coaching and working with people, I've just become very passionate about helping people to find where their holdups are, where the things are that are holding them back, what beliefs hold them back from showing up for themselves the way that they want to show up. And yeah, it's powerful work.
Yeah, I love that. In fact, I had a really powerful experience with you before I think it was like the night before I left to go on my trip. And Jessica, for those of you who don't know, she's also a massage therapist. And so she was going to do massage on me. And all of a sudden, some beliefs started coming to the surface as she's doing the body work. And it was a powerful healing release. Like I was sobbing my eyes out. And then you kind of took a little bit of a step back, asked me some questions, had me do some introspecting, and then flipped me over and literally flipped the paradigm for me, shifted into something completely different than what I was sobbing and crying about. And oh my gosh, like that has changed me in so many ways. It was such a healing experience to flip that paradigm into something other than what it was. So I'm excited to jump into this. And so would you be willing to just take a bit to share what your subject matter is for today? What's the topic and what are we going to do with you today?
Yeah. So that's exactly what I want to lead everyone in this class through, is how do we do that? How do we shift our paradigms when we feel like we are stuck in an experience that we are living over and over and over again, and it just feels like such a heavy part of who we are? We can't break free from that. Like, how do we shift the paradigm? How do we break this cycle? What does that even look like for ourselves? Because like you said, Mom, Janet, nothing in that session changed. Like nothing outside of what was going on in that session changed for you, but the way that you viewed the experience that was happening to you shifted. And from there, you can show up differently when your paradigm shifts. When you start to believe differently about the world around you and about what's happening to you and the experiences you're having, that's when you start having a different experience, is when you shift the way you believe what's happening to you, when you shift the way the world is happening to you. So today, I just kind of want to walk everyone through what that looks like. How do we first of all identify where we're getting stuck? And how do we reframe it and shift it so that we can have a different experience with the way we show up in the world and with the way the world is happening around us? So I have just a couple slideshows I want to take everyone through as we kind of go through this. I encourage discussion. I encourage questions. I encourage, I don't know, just jump in when you feel like it. And then when we're done, I'd love to maybe walk one or two people through the process of a reframe, what that looks like for you guys.
Okay, awesome. That sounds good. I'm excited about that. Let's jump right in. Go ahead and share your screen if you need to, and we'll get started.
Okay, perfect. So, all right, you able to see that okay?
Yes, got it.
All right, so identity and belief shifts. This is really important because the way that you see yourself and the way that you believe you are in the world affects how you show up for yourself, for the people around you, in all areas of your life, and it affects the experiences that you have. The lens that you view the world through will affect the experiences that you have in your life because you're seeing it through a very specific frame. So first of all, before we kind of get into that, I want to discuss like, what is identity? Like when you think about what your identity is, what is that for you? And I'm genuinely curious, like, what do you view identity as for yourself?
Yeah, you guys go ahead and type into the chat or unmute your mic and share what your thoughts are on what is identity. What does that mean for you?
I'll ask you first, Mom, for when you think of identity, what comes up for you around that idea of like identity?
I love that question. So when I work with people one-on-one in my mentoring business, I'm always saying, okay, we're working on the identity level, which is how you see yourself and how you think other people see you in the world.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. How you see yourself and how other people see you. Okay. Any other thoughts on that? Like what is identity to you? How do you identify?
Yeah, well, gosh, you can go really deep with this. And I think it has to do with your beliefs. Oh, let me move to Sherry because Sherry's got something here.
Yeah.
For some reason, I used to identify myself by my mistakes. And a lot of people identify themselves by their beliefs, their past, their trauma, their memories, their upbringing, their religion, lots of people identify with those things and then they see themselves as that. And like Sherry said,
So
Edith says,
one
more thing. Edith says it could be my culture.
Yeah. So the way you were raised, that definitely can be a part of who you are as an identity. The next thing I want to kind of dive into is like, there's kind of a common theme between these things that we were talking about, like the things that have happened to us, the way we were raised. What do those things have in common? The things that those two things have in common is they're both external sources. They're external sources. We're giving our power to identify over to external sources. When we identify based off of culture, or we identify based off of the choices we've made in the past or the things that have happened to us, it's not an internal power at that point. We're not claiming who and how we want to show up for ourselves. We're giving it away to an external source. So the first step in claiming your identity is getting very clear on how do I want to show up for myself. right? Not what is creating it for me. How am I going to create it for myself? Not how is something else going to create my identity for me.
That is awesome, Jessica. So lots of people are saying, Karen says, I used to identify myself as my religion. So there's that external source. And Sherry says, I almost lost myself raising my kids. Another external source.
Yeah. And the difference is, like, those are very key components of who we are and what make us who we are. But when you want to show up as something, you have to take charge of it. You can't leave it up to another thing to dictate how you're going to show up for yourself or for your family or for anyone else in the world. You have to take charge of that and claim it. This is how I'm going to show up, regardless of all of these other things that make up my character, right? Right. Those are parts of your character.
Yes.
I love that. Okay, perfect. So identity then is simply the fact of being who or what a person or thing is. Or simply put, it's existing as you are. That's really all identity is. It's sitting in this space of existence. It's very neutral. It's a very neutral place to be because it's not an action. It's not, I like to put things in the perspective of positive, negative, and neutral charge. So identity is a neutral space because it's not forward and it's not backward pulling energy. It's just there. It exists, and you're just in that space.
I love that you said that. I like to say to people, just be.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really what it comes down to, because identity can change, and it will change, and it should change, because you're an ever-evolving, ever-changing person. Sometimes identity changes from minute to minute. But when you are present, in a present moment, you can connect with who you are in that moment, right? How am I showing up for myself in this moment? And just be that present self. And that's where you find power and identity, to act according to what feels right for you versus what feels right according to all of these external sources. Okay, so now that we have a clear idea of what identity is, let's talk about beliefs for a second and how that plays a part. So a belief then is the acceptance of a statement, that a statement is true or that something exists. And I like the keyword acceptance in there, because it really is a choice. When you believe something, you are choosing that belief for yourself. There is an element of agency and accountability when you hold to a belief. And that is very important to remember, because the things that we believe shape our experiences. And it looks like this. This is what we call the belief cycle. So when you have an experience, it usually starts with an experience. So you have an experience, and something about that experience creates a belief in your life. So something happens to you. Because that happened, you now believe something about yourself or about the world. You take that belief and you internalize it, and you begin to have thoughts about that experience and about that belief. And those thoughts perpetuate, and the more you think about them, they start to create feelings in your body. So you have an experience, creates a belief, perpetual thoughts are happening, which then create feelings happening in your body. And what happens when you have perpetual thoughts and perpetual feelings? What happens? Those thoughts and those feelings, they call you to action. You do something when you are constantly having the same thoughts and the same feelings. They propel you to action, and those actions become behaviors. And a behavior repeated time and time and time and time and time again becomes a habit. And when we have a habit that we perpetuate, it creates an experience for us. And you can see that as that happens, it creates this loop, right? So we had an experience, created a belief, we have thoughts and feelings, which created behavior and habit, which then in turn create the same experience for us that caused that belief. And it's just kind of this perpetual cycle that we get stuck in, right? So now our identity is caught up in this cycle of this is the experience that I'm having. This is the belief I have about it. And because I keep having the same experience, the belief is being confirmed over and over and over again. Because we keep creating that same experience for ourselves over and over and over again.
That's terrible.
And then, yeah, it is. You get stuck. And another way to put it is like this: your belief creates your experience, and your experience confirms your belief. I want to say that again. Your belief creates your experience, and your experience confirms your belief.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be very careful what you choose to accept as a belief in your life, because the things that you believe will perpetuate the experiences that you have in your life. So if you are having experiences that feel out of your control, that feel overwhelming, that feel perpetuated time and time and time again, that's when we need to check the belief, because we can't do very much about the experience that created the belief. We can't change the thing that caused us to believe that thing. We can revisit it, and we can definitely do work around the experience. We can't change that experience, but what we can do is we can go back to the belief, and we can analyze it, and we can ask ourselves, does this belief that served me once, because it served you for a reason, you had that belief for a reason, it was keeping you safe from something, from an experienced harm or trauma, does it still serve me now? It served me once, does it still serve me now? And if it's not serving you any longer, it's time to establish a new belief. And it's time to accept something as a new truth for yourself.
Jessica, this is so empowering. It's so empowering because you're giving people the opportunity to take full and complete responsibility for what's going on inside of them. They're not to blame. In fact, Elliot just said, does that mean I had the belief before the first experience? For example, sexual abuse as a child, did I believe it before the first incident? Or is that not a fair example to use? What would you say?
I would say that's a very specific scenario, and it's hard to pinpoint exactly which one came first. It depends on, it could have been influenced by things in your environment that were happening prior to the experience that you had. So those beliefs definitely could have been perpetuated prior to an experience that you had, just based off of culture and your society or the community that you were in, and how that was already kind of presupposing the experience that created a belief. So potentially yes.
I always tell people, it doesn't mean, like, if you were gang raped at age 16 and then it formed a belief that you're not enough, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are to blame for the experience, but you are responsible for what you do with the belief system and the thoughts and the stuff, that after effects that come from and through those experiences.
Right. That's so true. Like you have to take ownership of your life. You have to take ownership of your experiences. And like you said, you aren't to blame for these experiences that you have. A lot of the time, these beliefs that are formed, they're formed as a safety response to something that threatened us at one point, right? We felt threatened by something, and our body's reaction was to create a belief inside ourselves that would keep us from experiencing that same hurt again in that same way in the future. And there's nothing wrong with that. It served a purpose. It was doing its job at the time when we had the most information we had at that time, right? But as we grow and as we change and as we develop, sometimes those beliefs that were keeping us safe later on down the road are no longer keeping us safe. They're holding us back. And that's when it's time to analyze, okay, is this something that is still serving the highest good for me, or can it change and evolve into something better? I see a couple comments. I wanted to go to those really fast.
Okay, let me read them.
Okay, perfect.
Oh, Ellie was just saying, influence prior. I accept that. It does make sense. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'm glad that worked out for you. Okay. let me go back to this. I wanted to also touch on this idea of the experiences that we have. We see them through a very specific lens. We see them through the lens of what we believe in the world. So when an experience happens to us, we view it through the way that we see the world and the way that we believe the world to be. And then when that experience is confirmed, it just confirms that, like, yep, the way that I'm seeing the world is right because this experience happened again and now it's been confirmed. So if you want to view your experiences differently, going back to this experience that you had with me in our session, you have to broaden your lens. You have to shift the lens of your belief if you want to view your experiences differently. Again, nothing about your experience changed at all, but the lens that you viewed it through changed, and you are able to show up differently because of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Charisse says, we are also born with beliefs of our parents and ancestors, as well as the collective beliefs from history.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely affects how we show up in the world, because those get passed down. Those do get passed down, whether we recognize them or not. And again, that is why this work is so important. It's so important to analyze, how am I showing up? And are these beliefs serving me? Because if you're not analyzing your beliefs and how you specifically want to show up, at that point you are becoming a product of someone else's thoughts and beliefs, and it kind of puts you into a little bit more of like a victim mentality, right? Like the world is happening to me rather than I am showing up for myself in the world the way that I want to show up, right?
Yeah.
Coming back to this idea of like taking your power back to create your life rather than letting life happen to you.
Yeah, that's a good segue into what Katie says. And she just said in bold, this is excellent and so empowering. I feel confidence pouring over the listeners already.
Oh, yeah. Yay. That's awesome.
Good.
Yeah. So really what it comes down to is, if you want to be having a new experience in the way that you are showing up in life and the way that you perceive life happening for you, it starts with the belief system. You have to go back to what you believe first, because if the belief system is not in place, when a new experience presents itself, you won't accept it. You won't accept the new experience because the belief system that you can have it, that foundation will not be there, and you will not receive it into your life. You will reject it. You won't be able to see it because your lens is different. So if you want to receive new experiences, you first have to change the way you believe the world and yourself and your ability to accept those experiences into your life. So here's what that looks like. There's a 5-step system that I kind of want to take you through for how to invite a new experience into your life. So the very, very first thing we have to do is we have to acknowledge what you do want to be experiencing and take responsibility for it. So going back to that idea of taking responsibility for the experience you want to be having, right? Things happen to us, but we still get to choose to show up for ourselves the way that we want to show up in this world, regardless of the experiences that are happening to us. And you have to first acknowledge what it is you want. You can't sit there and say, I want to have a different experience and leave it at that, because that gives you no direction. It gives the universe no direction. It gives God no direction. You know, like you can't just say, I want a new experience and leave it at that. You have to get very intentional and figure out, okay, I know I don't want to be experiencing this. So what do I want to be experiencing instead? And what are the steps I need to take to make that happen for me? So that's the very first step. You have to get past the I don't know phase of it. Because if I were to ask you right now, Mom, what do you want? What is your first instinct? What's your first instinctual reply to that? What do you want?
Happiness, freedom,
happiness,
joy.
So, okay, so that's good, you know. But if I were to just randomly walk up to someone on the street and say, hey, what do you want? Their instinctual reply is going to be, I don't know, right?
Yeah.
And And why do we say that? Why do we respond with I don't know?
I don't
What do
know.
you think? I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Because it's an easy out. We don't
'Cause
have
it's
to
an
go
easy out.
inside and we don't have to stare down our own inner gunk.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know is the easy answer. If we don't know what we want, we don't have to face the things that we're afraid of, right?
Yeah.
Because if we know what we want and we're not doing anything about it, what does that say about us?
That we're responsible for that. It's
Yeah,
on us.
yeah, exactly. So the I don't know is the easier answer, because if I don't know what I want, then it's not my responsibility, or then it's not on me if I'm not receiving it, right? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to get past that. We have to get intentional with what I want to be having, take responsibility for it. And then the next part is really key. You have to articulate it. You have to be able to talk about what you want verbally, in writing. Writing is good, but you have to be able to verbally articulate what you desire in your life, because if you cannot verbally manifest the experience you want to be having in your life, you will never be able to physically manifest that experience in your life. You just won't. If you can't even talk about it, you won't be able to live in the energy of it physically. So if you want to be living a new experience, you have to be comfortable with the energy of that experience first. And a good place to start is by getting comfortable talking about it, getting comfortable verbally articulating the things that you desire and calling those experiences to yourself. Get comfortable with them.
Yeah.
The other part of this is that we can't expect others to automatically know what we want, right? Sometimes, like, I think we just assume it's obvious. People know that this is what I want, and we just expect them to already know that about ourselves. But the thing that happens when we expect someone else to take control of our experience is we deny ourselves our desire. We deny the power that comes when we fully step into our experience. When you hand that power over to someone else, it's no longer an uplifting, empowering experience. It's someone else's uplifting and empowering experience, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be able to make it your own, and you have to tell other people what you want and what you need. And then I was just going to say the last part of this is to get help when you need it, right? There are resources out there to help you do this mental work, because it is mental work, and that can look like a lot of different things, right? That can look like a therapist, that can look like a coach or a counselor, that can look like a trusted source like a spouse or a friend or a family member, right? But get the help where you need it, find the support where you need it, but don't let them take over the creation of your experience, right? Let the experience be yours, get the support, but let the process be yours. Don't give the fulfillment of your desire away to someone else. Let yourself be the one to fulfill creating the experience that you want to create for yourself.
Oh, I love that. It's taking ownership, taking it into your own hands. You are a creative being, and the onus is on you. The fullness, 100% of the fullness of agency is on you. That's what's steering your ship.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Take ownership of your experience and know what you want. So that's step one. Step two is this. Oh, and I actually wanted to go back to this. So step one, the very first step when we're going through this process, when we're analyzing our beliefs and our identity, it's to step back, right? It's to get the broader perspective. So step one is taking a step back. It's getting a broader perspective of everything so that you can get clearer direction of where you want to go. So step number two then is to face your fears around your desires. So going back to that idea that we use the I don't know because it's a safe answer. Consider this. If it was okay to get what I want, I would already have it. I want to say that again. If it was okay to get what I want, I would already have it.
Oh gosh, that triggers inner
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, what does that trigger? What comes up when you hear that?
Well, sometimes it doesn't feel safe
Yeah. Why doesn't that feel safe?
because you might have to do something hard to get what you want.
Yeah. Yeah, and what's hard about doing the hard work?
Taking ownership.
Taking ownership. Taking ownership of what? Mhm.
Oh, Sherry says, I don't believe that. I'm not sure what you're expound on that, Sherry.
Yeah.
Yeah, taking ownership of where you want your life to go. It's on you. It's not a reflection of how the world has wronged you. It's on you. If you don't like where you're at in your life, then you got to get up and change something.
Yeah. So let's go back to this idea of if it was okay to get what I want, I would already have it. Did Sherry respond back? Because I'd love to hear more of Sherry's thoughts on that.
Yeah, Sherry says that if I don't have it, I can't have it. She says, I don't believe that if I don't have it, I can't have it.
Oh, okay. So is that the belief that you hold then, Sherry, that if I don't have it, I can't have it? Or is that how you are interpreting this statement of if it was okay to get what I want, I would already have it?
Yeah, go ahead and respond when you get a minute, Sherry.
Because there are different ways to, I think, to interpret this. And I think one way we can look at it is if it felt safe for us to have the things that we want, we would invite those experiences into our life. But if there's something that we want and we don't have it, there's a reason for that typically, right? There's something about going after and getting that thing that doesn't feel safe. So we hold back from it. We don't go after it.
Yeah. So Lorianne says sometimes it's a timing thing. Sometimes it's just on its way, right? That's the reason you don't have it. Sherry says, my interpretation of your comment, I believe that I can still have what I want.
Oh, okay. Well, that is a great mindset to have because that invites the experiences in. It does invite the experiences in. If you're already holding the belief that I can still have what I want, even if I don't have them right now, I think that's a very healthy mindset to have, that even if I don't have it now, there's still potential for me to receive it.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Kind of going back to this idea of if there is something that you want that you don't have yet, there's typically a reason for that. So what happens when we say what we want and it doesn't come back to us? All of a sudden, there's all of this potential for pain, right? Potential for rejection or loss or something. If we verbally put into words what we want and we don't receive it, what does that do for you? I don't know. For me, that creates this pit in my stomach of oh man, I put that out there and it didn't come back to me, and that feels embarrassing.
Yeah,
I feel like I got rejected.
You go into what's wrong with me, or maybe I don't deserve, or I'm not worthy, or I'm not enough. You go into those things.
Right. All of these potential fears come up for us. And I want to dive into what those fears look like for people. So in life, there are three basic needs. We have three basic needs. We have the need for love, the need for safety, and the need for belonging, right? So to be loved and accepted by someone else, to feel safe where we are and with who we are, and to feel like we belong as a part of something. Those are the three basic needs. Our subconscious at all times is trying to keep those three things intact. At all times, we are trying to make sure that we feel loved, that we feel safe, and that we feel like we belong. So when we make decisions about ourselves and about the world based on our experiences, we do make decisions on ourselves based on the experiences that happen to us, typically from a young age, kind of like what we were talking about earlier. And those decisions come back to these three basic needs, right? The beliefs that we create come back to typically one of these lacking. that experience was lacking love or safety or belonging. So moving forward, I'm going to do this thing so that I make sure that those needs are still being met, right? And these decisions, they become strategies for our lives so that we can keep that love, that safety and belonging intact. And those create our patterns. Those decisions, going back to that belief cycle, right? We do those things perpetually over and over again because we're trying to maintain balance in the areas of our love, safety, and belonging. And then we create these patterns and habits. So to change the pattern, first off, you have to identify which of these 3 needs were not being met, right? Which of my 3 needs aren't being met in that pattern? And secondly, you have to recognize the fear that is perpetuated because of that need not being met, right? So, okay, my need for love isn't being met. So what is my fear? My fear is that I'm unlovable because my need for love is not being met.
Yeah, that's painful.
Right. And it is painful. It's painful to recognize that. So now we have to go back to the belief underlying that. Okay, why do I believe that I am not lovable? Like, what specifically about that experience told me that I am not lovable? Why was my need for love not being met in that experience? And is that still true for me today? Is that still true for me today?
You know, Jessica, it's interesting that we take these. So we're recognizing the pattern. I don't have enough love. And so therefore I'm not lovable. It's interesting that we internalize it and make it about our identity. It always comes back to identity. I'm not enough. I'm not special. I'm not beautiful. I'm not cute. I'm not funny. I'm not rich, whatever it is. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. We do make it about our identity. And again, those external factors that are dictating to us who we are rather than dictating for ourselves who we are, right?
Right.
So I want to kind of go over some of the 5 major fears that show up for people. I hope these help you just to kind of recognize what fears are coming up for you when you're trying to analyze these beliefs that are being held back for you. So the first one that we often see is extinction, the fear of extinction. And that is the fear of annihilation, the fear of ceasing to exist. It's more than a fear of death. It's more of how we might die or how we just will no longer be, right? We're no longer in existence. If you don't have an if you do not have an identity of yourself as the new version of who you want to be, it's hard to move forward because it feels like that version of who we are no longer exists, right? So if you have a fear of an extinction and you're trying to get rid of a version of yourself, you're not going to want to move forward because that version of you in your mind no longer exists. So the next fear that we see is the fear of mutilation or bodily injury, and that is the fear of losing a part of yourself, right? Losing something that makes you, or having your boundaries crossed over. It's when we feel physically unsafe or we're losing our natural functions, or that can show up as fear of being in large groups because you can't control what other people are doing to you in a space. The next fear that we see is the loss of autonomy, and that is the fear of being immobilized, paralyzed, or restricted, right? I'm no longer in control of what of my space or myself. Being imprisoned, smothered, or just otherwise controlled by something outside of ourselves. So when we think about this physically, it can look like claustrophobia, but this could be a fear of commitment in relationships as well, right? No longer being able to be in control of me or my space because now there's another person in the picture. This is a fear that if I go forward, I might be trapped. And it can show up whenever we feel helpless or powerless. So we've got extinction, mutilation, loss of autonomy. We have separation, abandonment, and rejection, which is the loss of feeling connected to something, of becoming a non-person, not wanted, respected, or valued by other people. It's kind of the idea that if we're kicked out of our community, we would just we just wouldn't survive, right? We no longer have that community around us that's supporting us, so we just wouldn't survive. We rely so heavily on that feeling of connection. And then the last one is the fear of humiliation, shame, or worthlessness. And that is what we call the ego death. So going back to those basic human needs, we need to feel worthy of love. We need to feel valued in the world in order to connect with others and to connect with ourselves. Shame is that feeling of I am bad. And if I am bad, how can I connect with other people? And am I even worthy of love? So yeah, so those are the five core fears. So anytime we have a belief, anytime we feel like we're being stuck by something, a good place to go back to analyze is these five fears. Okay, what's coming up for me? Am I afraid of being humiliated? Am I afraid of separation from connection? Am I afraid of no longer existing? And how can I support that fear in another way? Right? Because there's so many ways we can support ourselves in these fears, in these needs, in our basic needs. There are so many ways we can show up for ourselves to meet those needs rather than relying on an external source to fulfill those three basic needs for us. So let's look at them, let's analyze them and see, okay, what is lacking? What am I afraid of? And how can I support that in another way so that I can let go of this fear that's holding me back?
I love this, Jessica. So these are all recipes for suffering. And I feel like they're all stemmed in not knowing who you are, not having sovereignty.
Yeah.
It all points back to the identity.
It does. It comes down to get to know yourself. Because if you don't know yourself, if you don't know how you're reacting when things happen, if you don't know why you're reacting when things happen, you become you become subject to whatever happens to you. And that is not an empowering place to be. If you are just subjected to whatever happens to you, and I have to live with it, there's no power in that. There's no power in that at all. You have to know who you are. You have to know your why. Why do I want these things in my life so bad? Who do I want to be, and why do I want to be that person? And when you know those things about yourself, you show up for yourself in a much more powerful way. And the experiences that you have a greater impact in your life, in the life of the people you serve, who you love, because you unconsciously give them freedom to do the same thing, to show up for themselves in the same way.
Yeah.
But it starts with knowing who you are and knowing yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing I just want you all to consider is what fears might be getting in my way right now. If I'm being held back in a certain area, like maybe what's the fear around it, and start there. Okay, what's the fear here? What need is not being met by that fear? And how can I meet that need in another way so that I feel safe? So that's step number 2. So we had step number 1, which was to acknowledge it and articulate it. So that's your stepping back. Step number 2 is to face the fears. And that is letting go, right? Once we step back, now we have to let go. And that comes by facing the fears. Step number 3 is, now that you've let go, you now have to be willing to receive what you want when it comes. Because when we shut down our desires and our fears, we cannot connect with our truth. And if you can't connect with your truth, you can't connect with your power. And if you can't connect with your power, you cannot express that power. And we can't feel fulfilled if we aren't connected to our power. So, and part of our life purpose is to feel wholeheartedly alive and fulfilled, right? So you have to let go of those fears and be willing to allow what's ready to come when it comes. So here's a reframe I want you to consider is, my desires and my appetites in life are pointing me in the direction of my life purpose, right? They're not something to be feared. They're pointing me somewhere that's going to bring fulfillment and joy and that energy of being alive. So that's part of the belief work we have to do to set the ground in order to receive the energy when it comes. We have to be, again, we have to be open to the energy of a new experience, because we don't always know what form something is going to take when it shows up. I think we have an idea of like, we can have a very good idea of like what we want to have, what we want to be experiencing, but we don't always know how it's going to show up for us. The best way we can kind of do that is like know the essence of what you want. What is the energy of it? What does it look like and feel like and sound like? Kind of get a clear picture of the essence of how it will show up for you, but be open to the different potential forms it can take when it does show up for you.
Hey, Jessica, Corrine has a question at this point. Are you able to break for
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
Go ahead and unmute yourself, Corrine.
Hey, thanks. Just going back, I kind of had a thought. First of all, this is so empowering, and there's like so much wonderful information. Almost feeling overwhelmed, but not really, because I keep telling myself like little steps, right?
Yes.
And
yeah.
I've kind of been aware of these concepts.
Yeah.
So for someone who maybe might be more new to it or whatever, I think something that has helped me, and I just wanted to share, is where you were saying that reframe. And almost time it was like, where do I start? Like, what is wrong?
Yeah.
Victory is not what I want. I don't want, and almost hopelessness there I felt for a long time. So kind of sorting through some of this, to me, I think that one of the big red flags, I'm a visual person. So when I started to feel like I was telling myself, or I was feeling kind of the opposite of what that reframe that you had, my life this thing isn't directing my life to where I want it to go. That was like the red flag, like, oh, okay, right here, this is where I need to zoom in. This is what I need to focus on and ask these questions and dig deep so I can actually start to move in the direction I want to, right?
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense. Just kind of like a starting point and how to find it.
Yes. Yeah, no, I love that. So that's one of the things I talk about sometimes too in my coaching is sometimes we don't always know what we want, but one way we can find out what we do want is kind of through that process of elimination, right? Like, I know I don't want to be experiencing this. So maybe I can get clear on like, okay, these are the things I don't want. And where does that leave me to go from there? If I know exactly what I don't want to be experiencing, what's kind of left over from there? Because you're right, Corey, we don't always know where we want to be going, but we can get clear on like, okay, I know I don't want to be experiencing this. So what does that leave me left with if I have already eliminated this part of the picture? Thank you so much. Okay. All right. So now that we have take a step back, we let go. When you receive what comes back to you, that is your way of saying yes to yourself. Okay, I'm going to say yes to myself, and I'm going to receive the energy of this new thing that's coming up for me. Which leads us to number 4, which is now that we've received it, we have to develop resilience and we have to act, right? Because that thing, it might come, but it might not always stay, or it might not come easily. It requires resilience and it requires work. And that's the thing, is this is work. It's not easy. If someone is trying to tell you that like doing your inner work is easy, it's really not, because it requires mental energy. It requires emotional awareness, and that is hard to face, and it's hard to do sometimes. So if you're feeling like this work is hard work, I understand. I can relate to that, because it is hard work and it can be hard to do alone, which is why getting support in this work is so beneficial. Having someone that's there to walk through it with you can be so beneficial, because it is mental work. But we'll never get what we want if we give up the first time that we meet a resistance, right? So if we decide, okay, I want this thing, but it's not coming to me, so I guess I'm done, we're never going to get what we want the first time we meet a resistance. We have to keep moving forward and trying different ways. okay, if I'm meeting resistance here, how can I readjust so that it is coming to me in a more natural way, or it's showing up for me in a way that makes sense for me. And it does require action. It's normal for fears to come up in the process. Like we talked about, these things will come up. The more you do your mental and inner work, the more you're going to recognize patterns and fears where they were. And that's okay. The problem happens when we believe the fears, right? So here's an example of that. So we're doing the inner work, we get triggered by something, and we think to ourselves, this feeling feels awful, therefore it must be true. How restricting is that thought, right? I feel awful, therefore the feeling that is being dictated in my body is true, and I have to live accordingly to that. But it's not true, it's a fear. It's a fear because the need isn't being met. So again, we have to go back. We have to go back and analyze, okay, what's the belief that's perpetuating the fear? What's the need that's not being met? We have to find our truth again. Okay, if this isn't true, what is true? And then you act according to truth and not according to fear. When these thoughts come up of I feel awful, therefore it must be true, one thing we can do to kind of disconnect from it a little bit is to take a step back again, right? Try to neutralize yourself to the thoughts. We don't need to judge them. Those thoughts are going to come up, right? We all have thoughts. We all have negative thoughts and feelings and emotions about ourselves that we don't like. But we have to refrain from judging ourselves for having those thoughts, and instead try to get curious about the thoughts. So rather than, oh my gosh, I just had the worst thought about myself, like I'm a horrible human being, let's take a step back and say, wow, I wonder what that's about. I wonder where that came from. I wonder why that came up for me just now. Try to stay neutral to the energy of the thought, because when we start to get curious about the thought rather than judgmental about the thought or the feeling, then that's when we can start to recognize, okay, there's a need that's not being met, and how can I go back to it? Yeah, it looks like Corinne just said that is hard. It is hard. And it takes practice. It takes a lot of practice to stop ourselves from having these intrusive thoughts and feelings. It takes a lot of practice to step back and say, okay, I don't need to judge it. I can just get curious about it instead and not have such a reaction to it. It is hard and it takes practice. But the more you start to do it, the more you start to question the things that are coming up for you. You don't have to believe every thought you have in your head. You can question those things. And you don't have to believe every feeling that happens in your body. You can question those things.
Jessica, I think that this is the epitome of self-awareness. I mean, this is really where self-awareness comes into play. And when you have good high levels of self-awareness, you can tap into the true identity, which is authenticity of your soul. And that's freedom.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does come down to the self-awareness. Yeah. So we try to reframe our thoughts, right? And we neutralize the energy. Sometimes you have to wait for the energy to settle. Mom, do you mind if I use your example of our session?
Yeah, go ahead.
So in that session, right, there was a release that came up for you. And I didn't try to force you to the end of that release, did I?
No, you just stood there and held space and let me have it.
Right. Right, because the release isn't bad. The emotion isn't wrong. It's serving a purpose, and it's okay that we feel it. And we shouldn't try to change it in the middle of it, right? It has to work itself through our body. It has to go through the process. So when you're in the middle of these intense emotions and these intense feelings, you have to be willing to give yourself grace and give yourself space to feel what's coming up in a non-judgmental way. try to stay neutral to it as much as possible, but let yourself feel it through. And then once you felt it through, that's when you take the step back. And then that's when you analyze it. Okay, I wonder what that was about. I wonder what came up for me. But you can't shut it down. It needs to feel its way through before you can find that balance again and neutralize it. Yes, Corinne, self-awareness, self-acceptance, self-unconditional love. Hey, all right, last step in all of this is to hold yourself accountable. So once you recognized where you need to make a change, you've acknowledged the fears, we've done the mindset work to reframe those fears and those thoughts and beliefs. We've taken action towards a new experience. We have to hold ourselves accountable because like Corinne said, it's easy to fall back into those patterns and those habits of those old beliefs. It takes practice, it takes time. So we have to hold ourselves accountable to doing the work.
Hey, Jessica, we have a comment from Karen that says, I always felt guilty about wanting abundance. Like, who am I to want more? This is one thing that I must get over, but I don't know where this is coming from. Maybe not worthy.
Yeah. Karen, do you mind if I ask you a little bit more about that?
Go ahead and unmute, Karen.
Sure. Ask away.
Hi, Karen. Okay, so I'm going to read that again. So I always felt guilty about wanting abundance. Okay, so Karen, what is it about abundance that brings that feeling of guilt for you?
To tell you the truth, I don't know.
But
in my mind, I know that it's not wrong to want to be able to live without being right on the edge of poverty. You know?
Yeah, right.
and yet, where I've always been, and that's where I've always stuck. And I feel guilty for wanting more. And I know that that's not right. It's not a good place to be.
Right.
You know, I look at it. It's not like I'm envious. I'm just thinking, okay, we're supposed to prepare. And how can you prepare if you're drowning? If you can't get your head above the water.
Right.
And I just have stayed stuck in that. That's one of the things that I really want to overcome.
Yeah. Okay. So you said that you feel a little guilty thinking about having more, creating more, right?
Right.
Right. Can you tell me a little bit more about that feeling of feeling guilty?
I guess like even praying for more. Well, there's people that are a whole lot worse off than you.
Yeah.
And, you know, and you're just this little person, and there are people over here just starving to death. You're not starving. You got a roof over your head. You know, all this scenario plays in my head. But logically, I know, well, you can help a lot of people if you are doing better.
Right.
And you have it's hard to help people, to reach out and help if you're struggling yourself. So, yeah, I know that logically.
Yeah. So there's this idea
I just
that
don't know.
if I have, like, I can't have more because there are other people that are suffering more than I. So who am I to ask for more when there are others that are suffering?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you this, Karen, does you having more and creating more abundance in your life, does it take away from someone else's ability to also create more?
No. In fact, if I could do better, then I can help others to do better. I know that logically.
Yeah.
You know,
logically, but the feeling of it isn't there quite yet, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
So the idea then that if I create more abundance, then I can be there to support those who are suffering or in a worse state than I am, right?
Right.
Right. So how does that feel for you, as opposed to this living in guilt around abundance versus if I have abundance, I can share it freely? What's the difference there in that energy?
Well, I can share it freely is much more positive.
Yeah.
I think it always goes back to childhood. I remember my parents sitting around talking about how we're going to make it, you know, pay this bill, hold this one off. And when I knew I needed new glasses because I couldn't see the board well in school, and I thought, I'll save them money. I won't tell them I can't see good. That's ridiculous, I know, but that's how my child brain was. And so I went for a long time not being able to see in school because I didn't want to make a more burden to my parents by saying, hey, you need to get me some glasses because these aren't working anymore, you know.
Okay, yeah. So sounds like too there's a little bit of an element of having a hard time asking for your needs as well, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know why that memory just stuck out. Just keep quiet about this, you know. They're struggling.
Yeah.
And it seemed like it just perpetuated on down. Now there's 4 of us, or four kids. Why am I stuck in it? The other ones don't seem to be stuck in it like that.
Because we all view it differently, right? We all view the shared experience differently through our own perspective of the world, right?
Yeah. And plus I'm the oldest.
Yeah.
And I kind of took over a lot of times as the mother figure.
Yeah. So what would you rather be experiencing instead?
Definitely rather be, instead of like the job I have now, work second shift, I take care of people who are mentally challenged. I would much rather be in, I've always loved healing, natural healing, and using herbs and different things that mostly herbs, but I don't have any certifications, but I think I have a tendency, a natural, just a gift of healing.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I will just have somebody will tell me about something. I'll think, oh, I know what you need. Or it'll just come to me. But I've never been successful in it as far as making money at it. I've been successful in helping myself and people who will listen, but most people are just like, oh, I'll just go to my doctor.
Yeah.
Like about an hour ago, a neighbor, she had her leg all wrapped up, and I said, what's going on? She said, oh, I've got a cyst. And I'm like, oh, she needs a castor oil pack.
So it sounds like that's where more of your desire and your passion lies, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So let's put it this way. So the things that we desire, we tend to try to feed and nurture, right? And that's where abundance is created, is through the things that we nurture and tend to. So maybe the abundance feels lacking because where you're at isn't an area that you are nurturing actively the same way you would this other aspect of your life.
Right. Exactly.
Because you're not investing the time and energy into it the same way you would if it was something that you loved and were passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What comes up for you there with that?
What you said is so true. I mean, what I'm doing is what I know I can do.
Yeah.
And it does not bring me joy very often. I mean, there are times, you know.
Yeah. And do you nurture this area of your life? Do you actively feed it and nurture it?
What I'm doing?
Yeah. Like, do you invest energy? Like, do you invest your heart and your energy into it to create abundance?
I get a paycheck. No matter what I do, the paycheck is going to be the same.
Exactly.
Most people I know that work this job, they work themselves to death because the only way you can make more money is to put more hours.
Yeah. And is that an abundance mindset?
No, because it ends up that to put more hours means to strain on your health.
So maybe the abundance side of it hasn't manifested itself because it's not a side you want to feed with. At least it's not where you want to direct your abundance energy.
Right.
Yeah.
Where I feel stuck.
Yeah. So maybe the abundance energy wants to be directed somewhere else.
Well, yeah. That's what
Yeah. Well, thank you, Karen, for hopping on. Do you have any questions about that? Anything that feels unresolved from there that you want to go forward with?
Well, yeah. What do you think is the best way to focus on the things I do want?
Yeah.
And not feel so stuck on where I am. I know I can't just say, I'm going to quit because you know what? I'm not got no joy here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a very reasonable question, right? I don't think you have to quit your job to create an energy of abundance in your life, but maybe you can start feeding the abundance in another aspect of your life, right? You don't have to quit your job. You can still keep working, but where is the abundance energy in your life, and how can you begin to feed more into that on top of working your regular job?
Yeah, I know I can't just walk out because I got to take care of bills and
Yeah.
stuff, but yeah, that's just, it's not fulfilling.
Yeah. So does it have to be either or for you? Either your job or your passion? Or is there space for working my job and fulfilling my passion?
Yeah, because right now I have to hold on to both.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, I just could never let go totally.
Yeah.
Of what,
and that's okay.
Of what my passion is.
Yeah, of course. You shouldn't have to let go of what your passion is. So maybe for you, the mindset is, how can I create space for both? How can I create space for my job, my career, and how can I create space for my passion? And what does that look like?
Yeah. I guess it comes down to self-belief. It's always been the held back. That's always been the held back.
Yeah.
Actually,
So
Karen, it's coming down to
So
choice at this point.
Yeah.
Because you've addressed your belief. Now there's just a choice. Where am I going to choose to put my energy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Karen, for you, what I would recommend is, the next step, I think, is to get clear on what both of those energies looks like for you in your life. What does it look like to work your 9-to-5 job and feed what you're passionate about? How do those two coexist together? Is there space for that to coexist together? Is there space for it to coexist?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
It has to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So for you then, what the next step is to find clarity on, okay, what's the first step of allowing these to coexist together, right? Working the 9-to-5 job and creating space for what I'm passionate about and taking action. Once you know what it is, taking action.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And how does that feel?
Empowering,
Empowering, right?
Yeah, this is helpful.
Good. Okay. Well, Karen, thank you so much for volunteering to let me work through that with you and everyone else. I really appreciate your openness. Grace Kelly says, is it possible for your passion to become your job? Grace, are you specifically pointing that to Karen?
If she is, no.
Okay, and that's okay if not. Yeah, she was kidding. And for now, maybe that's your reality, Karen. Maybe the reality is there isn't space right now for my passion to become my job. But there is space enough, like you said, there's space enough for both. There's space enough for your job and there's space enough for your passion.
Right.
Right. Okay. Perfect. I think that was such a great example of that. Let me I just want for everyone to see really fast. These are the 5 steps that we just went through. We acknowledged the experience that she wanted to be having, right? We took a step back. We analyzed the fear, and we walked through letting go of that fear. We have to be willing to receive what she wanted. So we asked Karen, how can I say yes to myself? How can I include both of these into my life? How can I create space for both? That's saying yes. If I create space for both, I am now saying yes to the desires of my heart. Now we have to develop resilience and take action. So that was the action step that we set for Karen was, okay, it's time to figure out what that looks like for you. So taking action is figuring out what that looks like. What does creating space for both look like? And then the last part is accountability. So we want to set up some accountability for you, Karen. What is one thing you can do this week to explore that, to explore the idea of both? What is one step you can take?
An action step, right?
Yeah. What's
not just listening?
Yeah. What is one thing you can do to move towards creating that energy and creating more of the abundance in your life with your passion?
Well, there's a network marketing company that I'm interested in, and I've just been listening, and I bought a couple of products, and I'm thinking I'd like to get involved in making videos and kind of just sharing out with people what products help me. Not trying to really push, just say, hey, this is great. If you want interested, let me know, or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I have the ability to do things like that.
Okay.
But there's some things I need to learn how to do.
Yeah.
I've seen people do some really good reels, and I don't really know how to do it.
Okay, so maybe the action step for you this week is sitting down and just hitting record and seeing where that goes from there.
Okay, I can do that.
Okay, perfect. All right. Thank you so much, Karen. We appreciate your participation. Okay, so those are your 5 steps, everybody. That is the 5 steps for creating a new experience. You got to step back. You have to let go. Say yes to yourself. Take action and set up some accountability. And going back to that idea that when you change the lens that you view your experiences through and you view the world through, you begin to have different experiences because you're viewing the way things are happening to you differently. And so you experience it differently when that happens. So those are the 5 steps. I think we're running out of time. I wanted to try to open it up a little bit more, but thank you, Karen, for volunteering to let me kind of do a little demonstration on that
thank you.
Yeah, of course. Before we finish up here, were there any last questions or comments anybody wanted to make? Okay. No worries if not. Thank you so much for all of your participation. I loved all the comments and all of the perspective and the feedback that everyone got. It's like I said, it is hard work. It's hard work to know yourself in a very personal way. We have to humble ourselves. It requires a lot of humility to analyze ourselves and to take responsibility for the experiences that we're having. But when we do take that responsibility, when we humble ourselves enough to look at where we can be doing better so that we can create a better experience for ourselves, it is so empowering. It's so empowering when you are the creator of your life and when you're not letting life happen to you.
Jessica,
and we do have, yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, we do have limiting experiences. I don't want to discount that at all. We have limiting experiences in our lives that make it hard sometimes to fully step into what we want to be experiencing. But when you start changing your perspective and changing the way you view yourself and the world around you, your surroundings will begin to change around you as well.
Yeah. Could you stop screen share and we'll kind of close this out a little bit for those of you guys who Well, I just want to end with, I personally know I've worked with Jessica. She's worked with me before. I can tell you, I can witness and testify from a personal standpoint that you can get there so much faster when you've got someone who can hold that kind of space for you. Jessica is a master at coming up with the right questions to guide you into yourself and to really wrench in there and dig your heels, not dig your heels in, but dig into there and find where you're holding yourself back. Jessica is a master at helping guide people through that. She does personal one-on-one mentoring and can really help you to come to a place of resolution and healing and moving towards the things that you actually do want to create in your life. If you would like to work with Jessica, either one-on-one or just get to know her better, or reach out to her and see what it would take, maybe what would that look like to work with a mentor one-on-one? Because I can tell you, you'll get there 1,000 times faster than if you just try to do this on your own. At least to begin with, right? To have somebody guide you through the process and at least teach you the skills than doing it on your own. So Jessica, will you share with everybody, what do we do? What's our next step if we want to work with you one-on-one?
Yeah, so right now I do coaching, one-on-one coaching. I have a 12-week program that I take you through where we go through these steps together. We analyze the beliefs that are coming up. We go through the same 5-step process of letting go, stepping back, letting go, saying yes to self, setting up for accountability, taking action, all of that. I walk you through that. I hold you accountable. We set up action steps together. And like my mom said, it really, you can do it on your own, but let me tell you, it is a lot easier when you have someone else helping you do it. In my own personal experience, it's hard because we don't always force ourselves to go to the deeper questions with ourselves and to go to the deeper spaces by ourselves on our own. Sometimes it requires someone asking those things of us and giving safe space for us to analyze those things in order for us to find the clarity that we're looking for.
And also to bring you back to accountability and taking responsibility.
Yeah.
We need help with that.
Yeah, we can do it on our own, but in my own personal experience, I don't force myself to think through those things on the kind of level that I need to instigate the type of change that I'm looking for. So having someone that will walk you through the process and hold you accountable is so beneficial. So I have a 12-week program. If you're interested in learning more, we can jump on a coaching call together, a free coaching call together, and we can talk a little bit more about what that program looks like if you're interested. You can find me over on Instagram. My handle is Life and Health Transformation. I also am hosting a journaling challenge in July as well. So if you're not sure if coaching is where you want, but you're kind of wanting to explore a little bit more about your identity and about some of your beliefs, that's what this journaling challenge is going to be all about. I have some guided prompts I'll walk you through. There will be a group for everyone to be a part of that I'll be there to support as much as I can. But the whole concept will be getting to know yourself, getting to know where some of those beliefs are that you're getting stuck on, so that you can get a clearer direction of where to move forward. So
awesome. Thank you for that. And we will leave the links. If you come back and watch the replay on my Greater Life, Greater Impact channel on YouTube, click the more button down in the description of the video, and we'll leave you the links so that you can get in touch with Jessica and personally work with her. I highly recommend it. Could there be a more important or more worthy thing to invest in than your identity and your sovereignty? I think not. So that's where I stand. I also work with people one-on-one. You guys know how to get in touch with me as well. But I personally have worked with Jessica. She has yanked some pretty deep stuff out of me that I didn't even know was there. And she has a gift. She's very good at what she does. So, all right. Thank you guys for being here. Thanks for those who participated. Thank you for your comments. Somebody asked, will there be a worksheet?
Yeah, I will put together a worksheet with the stuff from these slides that you guys can have access to.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody. I hope you have a blessed rest of the day, and reach out if you feel like this is where you're supposed to go next. All right. Take care, everybody. Mwah. Love you all.
Thank you,
Have a
everyone.
blessed week, and we'll see you next Tuesday.